If even after this statement by dictator Putin, Donald Trump continues to claim that the Kremlin wants peace, then calling Trump stupid would actually be quite a compliment. Vladimir Putin said today that he won't be able to reach an agreement with Zelensky to end the war. Putin's latest statement on September 5 isn't just words, it's more of a trial balloon. Before European guarantees and talks about a ceasefire with teeth, Putin stated that he won't be able to reach an agreement with Zelensky to end the war. At the same time, he added that territorial issues could be resolved through referendums, but for that, martial law in Ukraine needs to be lifted. And also, if Zelensky is ready, let him come to Moscow. Such a meeting will take place. Putting it all together, we get the formula. No real negotiations, only capitulation with a subsequent legalization of the seizure of Ukrainian territories through pseudo-referendums. This is what Putin talked about for 4 hours today at the Economic Forum. My name is Alexei Pechi. Today is September 6th. Next, everything in order. But before we start, I want to remind you that on this YouTube channel, several news analysis videos are released every day so that you stay up to date with all the news of the day. So I recommend subscribing to this YouTube channel so you don't miss new episodes, and please like this video. Also, subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pechi News. The link is in the description of this video. There we post breaking news as it comes in. So let's break down the statement of the dictator Putin step by step. The phrase, "I can't negotiate with Zelensky," is not about honesty. It's an attempt to impose a new negotiation framework on the West. Either you lift martial law from Kyiv, force Kyiv to abandon martial law and bring them to the negotiating table on Moscow's terms, or, as Putin stated, everything will be decided by guns. Well, in other words, Putin is saying either capitulation or Russia continues the war. Here's a big shout out to Donald Trump, who said that Putin wants peace. A big shout out to Donald Trump, who met with the bloody dictator in Alaska, applauded him and shook his hand. And Putin's point about referendums is actually the second part of this framework. Well, in plain language, you know, it sounds something like this. Recognize our front line as the starting point. Then we'll hold a so-called vote among the population in the territories occupied by the Russians, and everything will become legal. In other words, we're just going to legalize the seizure of Ukrainian territories. And let me remind you that Reuters was already reporting on this kind of narrative back in August. Putin talked about being ready for dialogue, but with the same red lines regarding NATO and the seized territories. Today's statements are of the same kind, only now Putin has started to state even more directly what he wants. Now about Putin's words saying, "Let Zelensky come to Moscow and we'll meet." This is a classic trap. The Kremlin wants a photo making it look like Zelensky is coming to Putin to bow. It's all to show, both for the domestic market and even for the external audience. Look, Kyiv acknowledges the Kremlin's authority over the agenda for any negotiations. Like, it's Moscow that's setting the rules. While the Europeans are gathering for some kind of coalition summits in Paris, while Trump is making statements, while the whole West is trying to plan something, Moscow is setting the agenda, and even Zelensky has to fly to Moscow to meet with Putin. Who's the main player in this story? Bankova's answer came the day before in Paris and is clear. Such proposals are unacceptable, and that's correct. It's not about the whole, not about the carpet, not about the location, it's about the content. No so-called negotiations are worth hollowing out the very idea of real guarantees and a truce with teeth, just for the sake of appearances, excuse me. Another detail is Putin's calls to lift martial law in Ukraine. Putin presents it as an obstacle to holding referendums in Ukraine where, according to his logic, residents of the occupied territories should decide the fate of these occupied territories. Well, you know, we've already been through all of these. All these pseudo-referendums in Crimea, Donetsk, Luhansk, and in 2022 in the occupied territories were, according to Russian logic, deciding the fate of 4 regions, even those territories that have never been occupied by the Russians. We've been through all of this. All these pseudo-referendums are just a show to legalize the seizure. But in reality, martial law is protection against the Kremlin's reverse scheme. First, they'll force us to lift martial law, undermine Ukraine's defense, then strike and say, listen, You removed your own protection. What do we have to do with it? That's the whole logic of these hypocritical Russians. They'll demand lifting martial law, canceling mobilization, and everything else just to hold referendums. Attention, where? In the occupied areas? And then that bold jerk will strike Ukraine and say, listen, it's your own fault. You removed your own protection. Given this, Europe's focus on air defense, electronic warfare, and Ukraine's mission isn't about escalation, as Moscow claims, but about insufficiency. To let the country be disarmed under the promise of some referendums. Let's make that clear. On September 5, Putin said he couldn't reach an agreement with Zelensky to end the war, and territorial issues would be settled by referendums after martial law is lifted. If Zelensky is willing, he should go to Moscow for talks. As you understand, this is not a peace proposal. It's an attempt to present the West with a false choice. Either peace on the Kremlin's terms or war until victory. The real choice is different. It's a truce with teeth and security guarantees for Ukraine that make a revanche technically and politically impossible. What are the consequences of these statements by the bold dictator for the Allies and Kyiv? Editor: first, Putin's rhetoric such as "let Zelensky come, we'll talk" should be countered with facts. Air defense, repairs, training inside Ukraine, monitoring, and a safe sky outside. Secondly, we legally close the issue of these pseudo-referendums. No vote held under occupation can be recognized. Lifting martial law before the front stabilizes and real security guarantees are in place is suicide. Third, we must raise sanctions pressure on Russia. Third, when you combine Putin's other quotes, they sound about like this. Putin said he's open to talks with Ukraine, but an agreement is impossible and foreign troops are legitimate Russian targets. He also said no one has seriously discussed Ukraine agreements with the Russian Federation yet, but Russia will supposedly honor any agreements made. Attention, in this phrase, Putin is not just spitting, he is, spitting right in Trump's face and saying no one has discussed agreements on Ukraine with Russia at a serious level yet. You understand, Putin says Trump is not a serious level at all. Well, yes, we met with him, we discussed Ukraine, but no one has discussed anything with us at a serious level at all. Who is Trump anyway? That's not a serious level. Speaking about foreign troops in Ukraine, Putin stated that if a long-term peace is achieved, then attention, there will be no point in them at all. And if they are deployed now, they will be legitimate targets for Russia. So Putin is already saying, why do you need any peacekeepers? What don't you know? This is Russia. If it promises something, it definitely does it, which of course it doesn't. We know these unwashed Russians who absolutely cannot be trusted. They are deceitful, hypocritical beings. To trust a Russian is to not respect yourself. Putin says, yes, believe me, if we agree on peace, you won't need anything. You won't need an army. You won't need peacekeepers. Trust me, we won't attack again. Come on. Putin also stated again that the best place for negotiations is Moscow. And he said, let them come if they want, and they will provide security and working conditions. So Putin promises Zelensky security in Moscow. The phrase Putin promises, to trust Putin, to trust that balding idiot, are you out of your mind? That's why today's set of phrases from Putin isn't about peace, it's about advertising a fake way out of the situation. He'll come, sign it, make it official. You have to respond to this not with words, but with force and law. Stop having discussions with Putin already. Paris has set a clear framework. Washington is ready to lead the monitoring. Europe is deploying a framework on Ukrainian territory and bringing in a peacekeeping contingent. When this framework is assembled, any referendums are just a show for television. Let Putin just shout with foam at his mouth that he disagrees and so on. We need to act, not talk, but act. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Bye everyone.